So this is my flip chart I use with the clients because I believe in education and empowerment. You need to know about your brain. You need to know how it works. You need to know about my process, and you need to be able to trust your brain, trust the process, and trust me. So the first thing I said, we live in the world of this earth. We live in the universe world. You have a world in your head. And this is, I'm your tour guide into your mind. Every decision is made by you. It's a 9-step formula, but everything about the steps is your decision. So I use 2 main theories. One is the limbic system. I love this thing, the limbic system. It is so fascinating. And a lot of the information has only come out since about 1996 with Professor Van der Kolk having his Vietnam vets have their flashbacks in the PET scan. Then he had his rape victims, because the women were saying, we've got these symptoms. He said, you can't have, you haven't been to war. So he listened to the women and put them in the PET scans, and then accident victims. He said they were very brave. He got them actually to have their flashbacks under the PET scan so they could trace where the trauma memory goes in the brain. And it was only after that did they find it went into the limbic system. The limbic system is the emotional seat of the brain. It is affected by the flight, flight, freeze mechanism because your brain is geared for survival. So I use the example of you're 3 years old and your brother drops a hairy spider on you. You don't know it's a fake one. You run around screaming. That activates that millisecond of trauma, danger. It goes into the limbic system as a DVD of every time it's activated, you're still running around screaming. And it's because it's the emotional seat of the brain. Every time you see a spider, the hormones come through and they can get stronger and stronger. And in the end, you can have phobias on spiders or dogs or whatever because of the trauma involved. Mm-hmm. Another thing they've found out is one that only sees in pictures. The limbic system does not learn there's a language in the brain, so it's all pictures. And it doesn't have time. So if you were scared of the spider at 3 and you're 93, you still got the fear because it's geared for survival. And the subconscious mind only does what it's told. It doesn't have the frontal lobes. You're making decisions, you're doing anything. The limbics, the subconscious mind does what it's told. So I say to people, be very careful what you say. Like, I'm stupid, I'm an idiot. I said, no, stop saying that because your subconscious mind's believing you. So, no, say those sorts of things. So what you've got is every trauma adversity, and it's unique to you, is stored in the limbic system as a DVD, as if it's still playing. If you get the trigger, smell is a very big trigger. If you smell the cologne of a man who beat you up, that can send you back because the sound and the eyes have a gateway to the limbic system. Smell goes straight into the limbic system. So it's all there. It's the brain. So every single thing which is you've had is trauma. And it could be anything from at 4 years old, you have to kiss your dead grandma goodbye in the coffin. And the child freaks out, trauma to them. What a lot of people, especially boys, don't realise, but being bullied at school is a trauma. And it affects them horrendously. I found that the people who have these disorders and are affected by them are usually sensitives and highly intelligent and artistic because things affect them a lot easier. And men and women think differently. You say to a man, he gets beaten up in the pub or something, where have you put the memory? He said, back of the brain with a brick on it, or behind the door and I've locked it. A woman will dissociate. Dissociate means she So she'll separate the whole event into 4 or 5 different things, the emotions, the sound, the what's happened, and it's put in all different places around the world, around the brain. Now, up until the 1970s, women weren't considered in their research because a woman would never aspire to the greatness of a man. And it was only when the feminism came in, which said, you have to look at us, we're separate, we're different.
And I was going to say, men's greatness is debatable anyway.
Oh, yeah. So they had some, I can't remember, it was some test they gave people, and the boys did such and such, which the men instructors, because all psychiatry was men up until 60s, 70s, and the women couldn't do that. So they said they couldn't reach. So you've had the fights for years in the 1990s of the false memory syndrome, saying that these memories aren't real. The counsellor has put these memories in you because they've been always working with men, and men repress, women dissociate. And when you start getting triggers and the memories start flooding through, which they aren't asked very much. I had one person who's in the book. She'd had a breakdown at 17, was in and out of mental hospitals, had 4 or 5 different types of diagnoses, I think about 17 different types of drugs. She was in her early 40s when I met her, and she was in the mental hospital with 3 to 6 months every year since 17 to 30 something. And she said it wasn't until the last year did the new psychologist asked her about her childhood. And she thought it was absolutely wonderful, because it's the first time in all those years that they bothered to ask her. They did bring in the grandfather originally when he was 17, when she said he was touching her up. They brought the grandfather in, and he said, no, I didn't. So she was classed as a liar.
And that would have been so traumatic. Obviously.
When he died, every one of the grandchildren said he was touched up, but they never said anything because it was hurt the grandmother. So all the girls put up with it. So she's now out of hospital, hasn't been back for about 10 years now. She had no skills or abilities for how to shift the mood, and she did my work, and she's now doing her own thing and happy as Larry. So that's the limbic system. Any questions?
What's your work called?
Huh?
What's your work called?
My work is called Envisioned Mind,
Okay.
because you're envisioning to change your mind.
Yeah.
The one other thing I work with, which not very many people know about, so if somebody here knows about it, it'll be interesting, psychosynthesis. You don't get taught it in university under psychology, psychiatry. I have to go and talk to an Italian person who will then tell me how to pronounce his name, so I can then repeat it over and over about 200 times to get it in. Roberto Azagioli, student of Freud, was supposed to take, good friend of Jung, was supposed to take psychoanalysis back to Italy. He said Freud didn't go far enough. He never brought in spirituality because Freud hated religion. And what Azagioli did was brought in Eastern philosophies, which was a big no-no back then. I mean, now you're getting encouraged to do yoga, meditation, all that sort of thing. Well, back then in the 1940s, 50s, it was a big no-no. So he was never accepted in the mainstream. There is some psychosynthesis for little organisations around the world. I was very fortunate when I was running one of the mental health conference in Adelaide. We were looking to get counsellors for our abused women. They were abused in childhood. We couldn't get them, so we rang around everybody, every counsellor, everyone there. And there was this Psychosynthesis Centre of Australia, the only one in Australia, in Adelaide. And she came and gave a talk. She said, it's easier for me to come and talk. So she gave a talk to about 5 of us in the group. And I said to her, this could be applied to dissociative identity disorder. She said, yes, I believe so, but it's never been done. So I said, right, I'll come and see you. So I got her to give a talk at the conference, because what we did was we had, I think, 10 psychiatrists. One of them was so iffy when he came, he didn't want to talk. He got trapped into coming. So they gave a talk. So if you had schizophrenia and interest in it, we had a specialist on schizophrenia, gave a talk. So you could ask questions and hear what he said. So that was, everyone loved it. And then we had a panel where other people asked. So PTSD and mood disorder, whatever. So so she came and gave a talk. And then when the conference was finished, I saw her in front of a whiteboard and said, I know trauma. Tell me about, because I've been studying under Van der Kolk and all Newwood and all the other ones, and every conference and every book I was doing is trauma. So I had to get myself sane. So in front of the whiteboard, I said, tell me about psychosynthesis. So she started talking the theory, and I said, stop, that's all I can take. So it's this, and this. I went back, and because I'm in the observer state, I can see myself in my own brain. I could work with it in my own brain. I applied what she told me, and it started to work. And then I went back a second time, and probably a third time, and I got my whole brain sorted out. Even my boys who've been supporting me and knew I would start screaming with flashbacks and everything. I'll say, if you don't want to know, get out of the house. So they would ring. I found that out, so they rang each other up and said, Mum's getting well, Mum's getting well. So it was real good. Yeah, so I had a couple of people in one of the groups, because I'm into education and empowerment. So every time I went to a trauma conference, I'd go back and tell everyone in the group what I'd learned. So they were seeing me get well. And two of them said, we want to do your work. So we started together. And the first person who actually got well with my work beat me. And she throws it up to me to this day. I got well before you did, Beverley. So, and there was another one as well. And then from there, because I was mainly dealing with dissociative identity disorder, I then worked out what can we do for people who experience trauma but haven't split in childhood. So I had a friend who'd was in the mental health sector, gone to Vietnam as a teenager and was told she's going to be safe. And so I went and saw her, and because she'd known me, she came to conferences and different things. I said, I've made a program out. Written it on trauma, but haven't split. I said, will you do it for me? And she said, yes. So I talked the theory, talked the program. She didn't know, but when she was doing it all, she couldn't see it. I'm going, yes, 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 it's working. It can work with somebody who hasn't split into dissociative identity disorder for any normal trauma. So then I started working with trauma in your placement with uni at one of the women's centres. We did depression, anxiety, stress. I've got that all done up in documented form. Presented at all the different conferences. So what you have is up to 7 years old. When you come in, when you're born, this is the psychosynthesis. The I am, the soul, whatever your beliefs is, has come in, and you're all ready to live this life, but you haven't lived this life before. So every time you do something, you have to have a way of storing your lived experience. So, picking up a bottle, crawling, that sort of thing is a start. But then up until 7, every time you do something new, a spark goes off in your mind to hold the lived experience. So you're 3 years old and you've got a little red trike and you put all excited and you put your leg over the trike. You'd never done that before. So a spark goes off in your mind to hold that part of you, which then has the mood or the role, because that's what your subpersonalities are, your moods and roles of holding. That one holds, their job is to ride bikes. So every time you get on the bike, that one says, that's me, that's my job, they come forward. So when you become 7 or 8, you get the 2-wheeler, still bike, so that one comes forward. And, 17, 18, you get your car, bike goes in the shed. So you haven't ridden a bike, you might have kids and say, oh, I used to ride bikes. So 10, 15 years later, you say, oh, I'll never go. You get on the bike, wobble, 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 and then it clicks in. The subpersonality who rode your bike has never been used for that 17 years or so, and that one's gone down quiet. And until you actually do the thing, they can't come back forward.
Is that stored in the limbic system as well as a memory in that regard?
Not the bike rider, because that's not trauma.
Yeah.
But any other mood disorder. So what you've got is, I actually met a person today who's never seen these books. Little Mr. Men, Little Miss, you got Miss Curious, Miss Shy, Mr. Grumpy, Mr. Brave, Mr. Worry. They're all moods, they're all roles. So when I work with somebody, I say, oh, let's meet Miss Anorexia, or let's meet Miss Depression, and they realise it's a separate from them. They aren't the depression. There's a part of them holding it.
Yes, right.
So what you have, you can have hundreds and thousands of subpersonalities depending on what your life experiences are. And they, by the time you're an adult, you're probably down to about 20 because, you know, all the childhood things. Like I was trying to explain it to someone the other day, and I said, look, this is a funny story. We lived down the country a little bit. We had horses. So right up by the back door, I had the horse manure underneath the lemon tree. So my Gavin, crawling, 9 months old or so, crawled out, sat under the lemon tree and was eating horse manure. So I said that he'd never eaten it before. So he created a subpersonality when he eats horse manure. So that one's never been used, never will, unless he eats horse manure.
He's probably got a really good digestive system.
So I didn't make a fuss. I just picked him up, you know, cleaned him up. I never made a fuss, so it was a trauma. But that's what you're doing. All those things you've done are all recorded in subpersonalities. So we have here is your love of music, the mother, the soldier, the scared person, the person who was bullied in school, the little boy with the spider. And you've got all different ages, babies. Because there's no time in the limbic system, if the thing happened to you, say at 6 months old, it's still there, and that subpersonality in lots of cases is still 6 months old. I have an example with one of the groups I ran. The woman said, I'm petrified of moths. Ridiculous. They're so ineffectual. Nothing. Moths. So I said, let's go in and see. So we went in and asked to meet the subpersonality who was afraid of moths. And she looked and gasped, and she said, it's a baby in a crib, and how you put the net over. In the old-fashioned way, they used to put the net over. There was a moth trapped, and the little baby was seeing the moth fluttering and petrified, and that was caused her to have the thing. So what we did in the visualization to heal her was we took the net off and put the moth away, and the little one she was no longer scared of moths after that. She came back and told me the next day, it's all fixed. Anything that's happened to you, especially trauma, is in the limbic system, not set in concrete, it can be fixed. And that's what I do.
Yes.
I like the word fixed. So the power of visualization, the subconscious mind does not differentiate between you visualizing the thing or you actually doing it. That's why meditation works. If you visualize yourself down the beach or going for a swim or under a waterfall or something, your subconscious mind believes you're doing it. And that's why my work is visualization. That's why it's so powerful, because your subconscious mind believes you've done it. And then the healing process takes over and you no longer have it. Nothing what's happened to you cannot be undone. Might take a little while. I've done a study on PTSD in the workplace with a PhD student in America. We had 9, 3 were fire brigades, 9 were women with sexual abuse in the workplace, hassling, bullying, that sort of thing. We couldn't get the soldiers to do it, which we really wanted to, but we're actually rewriting a program now. So if you know anyone who's been overseas or vets and that, I'm waiting for feedback to say that the study I want to do is viable. And the people who did the work, 10 hours, because we had the schedule, so they had to do all the ticking forms, had the schedule. The first day, The fifth had 10 hours with me over the phone, Zoom, Skype. Only 2 or 3 were in person because one was in Queensland and some in America. At the end of that time, all this, the ticking came down below PTSD. So they weren't classified as having PTSD anymore. I also did the DAS form, there's a DASS, Depression, Anxiety, Stress Schedule, which is an Australian one. And they all come down from high to within normal as a human does. So they weren't classed as having it. I teach in the program a simple technique. There's, I teach in the mood mastery, 1 step, which instantly you feel different. And that I can teach it in 2 hours. If you've got anything heavier or wanting to do, it's best to do the 9 steps. So a lot of people say they can't visualize. So I say, can you imagine? Can you imagine yourself down the beach? You've got cold chips, you're throwing it. Can you see that in your brain? Most see it in colour. Some see it colour, black colour, like a slide. Long as you can see it, you can use this process. If you can't see it, and it's all in black, which a lot of women in their 60s and 70s have had depressing lives, seeing depression, black all the time, there's a few steps I've got to do beforehand. But I have over 90% success rate with any disorder, and that's proven. So then I've got the let's begin. So that's the process, what we do. So as you can tell, I love the work. I've got something which can help people, and all those poor people out there on heavy medication with no life, and they're going to have a life. And that's the gift I've got to give to the world. That's why I said that my ego doesn't matter. My ego is my work. It needs to go out. I've demonstrated it to professors and that, and they say, this is brilliant, but I don't know how you're going to get it out. One of them was somebody Professor Warwick Middleton, he wrote papers. He did massive research for the Australian government of what needs to be changed in the sector. And I don't think he presented it to the government, you know, huge document, years of study, and I don't think they changed one thing.
They don't want as well. Yeah.
Too much money.
Too much money, and the pharmaceuticals companies don't want as well either.
So, as I say, anything what has happened to you, especially in adversity, can be undone, because that part of you is trapped in the limbic system, and it's still happening to them now. And that's why you've got so many people, like the veterans, and they get the trigger, they're back in the war. So we're looking at, I've got the research done, we're just waiting for this. I have to rely on somebody who's ringing up a friend who knows about research proposals and how to get it through to the government so that it gets approved, whether we have to. Any questions?
Wouldn't the implications of your methodology, wouldn't that apply to neuromuscular problems, even psychosomatic issues as well,
Yeah.
which are related to the mind and the fistula, you know, the limbic system in particular?
See,
We
yeah.
have a lot of application into that.
See, the first 4 steps is getting your mind safe and happy.
Yeah.
The fences, home, fences, a gate with security on it, no one can go in and out without you. So when you've got that in, the 5th step is meeting subpersonalities. Who do you want to meet? And then we look at it. So it could be the one who believes they're ill. I worked with one woman who had depression and she had cancer. The doctors have all said she was cured of it. She firmly believes she still had it. So when we went into the home and they had an asked, she found a subpersonality who still believed she had cancer. See, that would be very bad in the long term, because if you have a part of you what firmly believes you've got cancer and they're in the limbic system in the subconscious, it'll bring it back on because it's not accepting it was done. They believe it's there and your subconscious does what it's told.
And you're talking also about emotional trauma, aren't you, as well?
But there's almost like they hold on to that illness as a defense mechanism too. It's a way of safeguarding.
I've had
Agree with you.
a couple of people walk away from my work.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to get well.
Because they feel they don't deserve it.
Yes, and also,
Protection.
if they come from a family with money, I had one girl, had a beautiful 3-bedroom home, paid for by the parents, lovely car. She didn't have to do a thing. So she did whatever pleased her. She wanted to do acting and that sort of thing. And she wasn't prepared to get well. You've got people who are too scared to get well. So when I worked with somebody today who, I used the word, if he's got trauma in childhood, that you actually reparenting those parts of you. Because you get them, pick them up, put them through the healing process, and they get well, and then you give them a gift. So if they want a fluffy toy.
Incentive to get well.
When you meet the different ones. A lot of them are still trapped in the age. Now, this can be used on all different things. It can be used in business, where you have a home in your head and you set up for all your hobbies and different things and your business. So in your business, you can put everything in there with the videos, computers, everything, and you meet the part of you that runs your business. I had 2 men who went bankrupt, and when I asked, who's running your business? One was 12, brutalised 12-year-old, and the other one was 8. And he had no idea why it was 8, what happened to cause him to run the business. And they lost their, both lost their business. I used it I just brought myself together and I was applying all this, and I started doing masters. And what you do with university study, you do, I had a university room, study room in my home in the head, and I looked at it. How do I store my university knowledge? I store old-fashioned filing cabinets. So what I did is I pulled out a filing cabinet, blank one. Action for Change was the subject I was doing, and I had to go into an organisation and study how they change things. Wrote that. So then I said, I like to meet the subpersonality who wants to do this subject. So you have male and females, you never be shocked. I've had people have dogs, so it doesn't matter. A ghost. So what happened was that one came in. So every time I studied, saw it, read a book, did it, went into the organisation, I would say, right, we're doing this subpersonality needs to come forward. And all the knowledge we learnt went into the filing cabinet. So then I had to do a 15,000 word essay, I think it was. So I looked at the pro forma and said, right, we've got to write this essay. So while I was asleep that night, the subpersonality wrote my essay. They can work while you're asleep because all the knowledge was there. Granted, I've been in uni for 4 or 5 years, so I knew what I was doing.
So you could access it the next day and then just write it?
Took me 2 days to write it out, and I got a high distinction.
My God.
You can do that. I've got a technique which you can learn. My 4th son, he's doing adult managership courses, and the teacher was no good. Talked all about himself and never talked about the management. So he never bothered to study or doing anything. So he sat the exam and he got 40%, so he had to redo it again. So I taught him the process, and he came back and he was real excited. He got 80% for the next one. I said, why didn't you get 90 to something, 100? Because with this process you can. Oh, he said, I didn't read one of the books. You've had to have heard it or read it. So it's in the subconscious somewhere. With this process, you can get a yes or no answer for it. Because if you're doing the American way, it's all multi-question. So you got the right answer, one nearly right, nearly wrong, and very wrong. So you can use this process to pass the exams. So you can use it for sport. You can use it for health. I had a kid who got badly burnt in, he's got very fair skin, and he was left out in the sun. The father only had access to him and didn't realise about putting T-shirts and everything on. Badly burnt, raced to hospital. And when he came back, he was still sitting up. He still believed he was being burnt. So I said to him, Matty, because I was working with his mother, so he heard a little bit. I said, you've got a little Matty in you who still believes they're burnt. He said, yes. So I said, what does Matty need to know that he's not burnt anymore? So he wanted an ice house, and he wanted a room separate, because I hadn't set up the home in the head or anything. We just did it solely on this. Wanted his dog in there for company. I said, what about your mum? Well, she let the doctors do this to me. And I said, remember your mum yelled and screamed at the nurses not to do this, and they did it. So he did that. Now I said, you get bored in this room. His hobby was cricket, mad cricket. So I said, right, let's extend your room with the practice nets. Who's the two people you follow? And it was a spin bowler and the name will come in a minute. Yeah, I think it was that. And then you're also looking at the one who died a few years ago, the famous one of the early football cricketers. It'll come in a minute. So he had there, when you're in, and then what he did was he went out in his mind, he went out and bowled to or hit the ball from these people, these men, and he watched and was trained by these people. So anything you've watched on TV or read a book about, that's all in here, and you can use it as a picture form. So he went and played with them, and he trained up. And when he was well enough, he went out and played a game, and he got 4 out and 4 balls. You can use it for anything. Relationships. I mean, in your relationships, if they break down, it's because you both haven't grown or you're still holding crap. So you can, because you're meeting your sub-personalities and healing them, you can use it for anything. I'm looking for some veterans when we get going. Won't cost them anything. We'll run the training, the thing. So I've got somebody who's promised, he was in a veteran organisation, he's retired now, and he had some bad suicides with him, and because he was working a lot of time with snipers, and when they come back, it's very hard to assimilate. He said to me, if you can prove this works with veterans, I will personally take it to the Defence Force and fight for you. So I don't want to do the fight. I don't want to work with the veterans. What I want to do is train the people who are going to work with them, because I don't have time. Train the trainer, that's what I want to do. It's all written up as a full course. I've got 2 people in Denmark, a psychologist and a counsellor. I translated all my work into Danish, and they're starting to use my work.
Any prerequisites to do your course?
Any study you've done in the humanities. So if you're like, if the Aboriginal people love my work, I went to the Aboriginal TAFE in Adelaide and showed my work. Oh, she said, we want this, because all in pictures are dreaming.
And it resonates with them.
And she said, the only thing is, if you, because I was going to give it to them, help the Aboriginal people, that type of thing. She said, if we have it, the TAFE and the government will own your work, and you can't have that. It's not the correct, I said, no.
They will put it to the side.
So they couldn't do anything about it. I've worked with all colours, shapes and sizes with all different belief systems. So that when I work with people, I'll do, as I say to them, I'll do whatever it takes to help you get well. I had one woman, she was in the gym, I was going to, and there was 3 or 4 around her, and I was talking to her about my work, and a male voice came out of her and said, she's mine. You are not having her. And the other people with me were, but they knew I was there, so I was handling it. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're killing her. He said, so what? She dies, I jump across to somebody else. And it was a demon type thing. So she wanted to go. We went to the Catholic Church twice and he couldn't get rid of it. And even though he had parishioners there praying for the whole time and they gave her a rosary bead and everything. And then I found someone in a fire church who would work with Aboriginal people, so it was more open. And I went and saw him and we discussed it and I looked at him, we'd connected, which you do with other healers, you connect with them. So we brought her in because I like doing things in threes. And he was saying, I command you to go, all this sort of thing. I said, you've got to name it. Because he'll just say, you're not talking to me. So he turned around and named it. I want this one. And he cast him out. And
what was
gone.
the name that he chose? What was the name that he chose or found out? What was the name? Do you remember?
He didn't have to.
No.
No. He just named what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I can do minor poltergeist, low-level entities, but the heavy ones like that, I bring somebody else in with. I don't do anything heavy on my own. I always like to have the third person there with their expertise so that we're backing each other up and not doing something wrong, because you normally only get one chance to do these heavy ones. So any other questions?
Yeah. What's the ability to know what's trauma in your past?
Pardon?
How do I know there's trauma in my past, or how does somebody know there's trauma in their body?
It's actually affecting them. So they might have flashbacks. Like the veterans, you know, they hear the car backfire, they're on the ground thinking they're back, and smell is a big one. It's affecting their lives. You might have done a lot of work on yourself on all different modalities, and you've kind of worked on it on different levels. So, as I said, I have an over 90% success rate, and anyone taught by me can have the same. So long as you've got some, I mean, you could be aged care, you could be a counsellor, you could be early childhood, you could be a teacher, a psychologist, counsellor, social worker, social science, anyone.
I'm a carer.
Carer.
I care for my sister who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia.
I love that.
Yeah, and I also sort of care for my son as well, so I'm a carer for two people. But having said that, neither one of them on medication.
No.
No.
Good.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of studies around it, but I'm really fascinated with what you're doing.
Well, see, I'm prepared. The main thing you need to know with this work is reflective listening.
Yeah.
And I'm not so strict with my work saying if you haven't got 4 years social science or social work degree, you can't do my work. You can come to me and I'll talk over and I can then make a decision, executive decision. It's very, very simple. If you, as I say to people, I forgot to say goodbye to, if you say to people, can you imagine the seagull? And they say yes. I said, you can do my work. It's as simple as that. I don't have anyone abreact because we're not talking about what's happened to them. The question I ask, there's only 2 pages, your hobbies, your work, because you're building a safe home in your head, so you need that information. Have you ever been fostered, hospitalised, near-death experiences? And then you've got, I go 0 to 3, 3 to 7, 7 to 9, the major, just one word or so, what's happened to you. Because the first time people come to me, they expect to talk. And I'll say to them, I'll let you talk this first time. After that, no talking. Because we're going straight into the process. We're making a safe and happy home. We're meeting the sub-personalities and we're helping them get well. The average is about 10 hours. You need to follow up maybe 2 or 3 months later with something else will pop up, which has been hidden and you didn't know. So you just keep in touch.
And is it also involved like affirmation, like to nothing like that? So not to reaffirm it. No, beautiful.
Because
once it's gone, it's gone.
the limbic system doesn't know what the hell you're saying because it doesn't have a language. I find that fascinating.
So do you work with people that are taking
I'm a little bit deaf, so.
medication?
Pardon?
That are taking medication at the same time?
You can do it while you're taking medication. If you're going into psychosis and you haven't slept for 4, 5, 6 days, Valium is a lovely drug. You've got to sleep. Because if you don't, you're in psychosis. But Valium, 3 days and you can become addicted, so long as you can start sleeping again. Some people take drugs for an emergency and then gets them back down so you can start working with them. I don't condemn or anything. I say, let's get you work. And I love the work. You can tell I love the work. The privilege
and so no
helping people get well. I don't judge.
Yeah, good.
So when we have a safe and happy home and you reparenting, so I don't need to know you hate your parents or anything like that. When you put the fence up, and I say it has to be big enough, high enough, so no one can go under through. So if the person has got 2 metre high with razor barbed wire and electric going through it, you'll think we've got a few problems here. It's like a prison one, keeping yourself in. When you go in and in the children's area and you put a nurturing mother there, I have someone say, I'm not having that bitch there. I don't have to talk for hours on them to know she had a hard time. So you'd still need to have a nurturing mother, but you find an auntie or grandma or a best friend or somebody who, the worst case I've ever had is a woman who had no knowledge or anyone in her life who was nurturing, but she was nurturing in herself. She said whatever her mother used to do, she used to do the opposite. So she put herself in as the nurturing person in her home and her head. I don't make judgments. I don't say, oh, you can't do that or anything like that. The 9 steps go in, but everything about them, your spirituality, what you believe in, that's your truth. When we talk spirituality, I said to a woman, you know, what's spiritual? She said, I have no spirituality. I just believe in the earth. I've had 2 people say that. And I said, well, in the olden days, they used to wear garlic around their neck to stop evil spirits. I said, oh, that's fine. I'll put a row of garlic around my fence. That'll stop it. It's your intent. I had a 16-year-old girl who put a dream catcher as the thing there for spirituality. Now, in the real world, a dream catcher is not going to stop anyone from coming or doing anything, but it was her belief, her intent. So she believed it was right for her.
And then that can then become a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so will we call it a day, or will we stop and have a cuppa and come back for any more questions, or it's up to you? Did you get your money's worth?
Oh, yes, massive
Money, but
fantastic.
thank you.
I have a quick question though. Can you explain a little bit more about the dissociation that women do?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Could you explain a bit more about the dissociation that women do as opposed to what the men do?
It's a hard one because it's a thing a woman does. I have had the odd man do it, but their trauma was under 3. The child believes they're a part of their mother until about 3 when the second brainwave pattern comes. So if they've had trauma after 3, they're now doing the male way of remembering. So it's dissociating or separating the event in, you might have the sound, the event, the smell, you've separated in different parts
Of subconscious?
of the event, and you're separated in different parts of your brain. And it's all in the limbic system. But it's a woman thing. And that's why until the 70s, when they started working with women, did they realise the difference.
But that doesn't really affect your process so much, does it?
Doesn't affect the process whatsoever. So You've got any other disorder, you want to know how I treat it? In the book there, it's called The Boy Who Thought He Was a Dog. The first chapter after the editor does a blurb is my theory, which I just talked about. And I had a mother and son come, and he was 20. And if you know anything about special schools and kids, you know, they walk this, you know, he was daggy and, you know, all hunched over because he didn't want to be seen because he was classed as dumb and got picked and bullied on. So so the mother came and said what the problem is. So the first time we just did the basic, and he did that. The second time, we then I asked to meet who was the one to study, where's your knowledge? He had a scrunched up paper here, he had a piece of paper there, he had half a book there. So he had no structure in his brain for all his memories and schoolwork. And then I said, he said, there's no one in the house. So I said, I'll go outside. Sometimes they hide or do them. He said, there's a dog in a kennel there. And I said, well, he said, that's my student. So we brought the dog in and put him in the healing process and turned him into a human. And his mother said, oh, that's when he was a little boy, he believed he was a dog. So we used to put milk down in a saucer on the floor, and he used to lap it up like a dog. When he went to kindy, at 4 years old, they recognised that he could only follow two things. And a dog can't do more than two things at once. So the teacher would say, go to your desk, pick up the book, open the page, then he wouldn't know anything else. So he couldn't learn, like a dog did. So what we did is the second session I had with him, he wanted a professor. We got a student study area. He wanted a professor. So he said, okay, have whoever you like. I said, what about a librarian? No, I want a professor. Okay. So, and what we did was we got every sub-personality who did anything at school to go out and collect all their knowledge, the pieces of paper, the half the books and everything, come back and give it to the professor, who would then sort it out into a structure in his mind. So the next week, his mum come and he didn't. And he rang up and said, I've missed Mum, I'm at the railway station. And he said, how do I get there? And I said, well, you come out of the Adelaide railway station, you turn left, you go down the North Terrace, you turn left, you walk along to the bus stop number 9 or something or other, you get on that'll take you down Torrance Road, or turn right, or go down the street where I live. When you see the house, push the button and you can get off, come see me. All the time, the mother's saying, you'll never remember that. You'll never remember that, more than two things. He told me afterwards that he heard his mum say that, and he said, I'm going to prove her wrong. Half an hour later, knock on the door, there he is. And this kid walked in. He was standing upright. He was bright. He was happy. He had confidence in himself. And I said to him, don't take this as an offence, but when I first met you, you looked like a dog and you behaved like one. He said, I did. He said, but all thanks to you, look at me now. So I only saw him 3 times. I found out afterwards that he'd left his mother, gone with an uncle, and was in TAFE during the course. So why not? Why wouldn't I get high on that? So here he was going through the whole schooling system, not learning, and you can. So, okay, will we call it a day?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for everyone for being here. Any questions come up afterwards? If you want to be trained, thank you, I'd love that.
Yeah.
I've got some change.
Oh, you don't need change with me.
It's $15 for one, but if you take both, that's the journey. That's the beginning of the journey, and that's the journey. So I can sign it for you if you like.
And then I wouldn't mind, as we said, swapping the cat,
Yeah.
because I'm super interested. So I appreciate it. That was a lovely session.
So I want to get my
Thank
work.
you.
Oh, you
Thank
sure?
you. I'm positive. Thank you.
Right, I want to have people who I can train up. They can be, if they want to specialise in children, I'm quite happy with that. If they want to have a, specialise in PTSD, I'm quite happy to train them to do it. I'll help them run some groups or courses, and then I'll step back. I'll train them all up and then step back, because this work needs to go worldwide.
So prior to getting the training, would they have to do their own inner work? Would they have to relieve their traumas?
Not really, because part of the training is actually doing the work. And it's, and
in that process, you're also.
yes, and it's good to do it in a group, because not two people are alike. I worked with identical twins and they weren't alike. One had been in the hospital, the other one hadn't. So everyone is so different, and there's millions of people out in the world, so there's millions of variables you're going to meet. So if you're doing it just with me, you're not going to get the expertise of working. So if you've got 10 people in the group and you don't talk about your therapy, you just say what's wrong. So you can say, you'll hear people say, well, my retreat is such and such. Another one say, oh, no, I'm such and such. So you'll hear what people say. When they start meeting sub-personalities, they'll say, well, I've got the one what was bullied at school, and this is what I've done. So that the others can hear it, and they can hear what they've done. Because I don't say, no, you can't do it that way. Whichever way you want to heal them and where you want to put them is, like today I worked with one this morning, mad on horses. So we've got a herd of horses in her retreat with a stable and everything there. But another person would want something else. You allow the person to do whatever they need to be happy.
It's more or less self-directed in a way.
I'm a tour guide into your mind. So I've got the steps that allow you to work your own pace. Though I am a little bit impatient.
But I like it that you've got the process, and it's so for me, it sounds like it's easy to follow.
Yes.
And it's also makes a lot of common sense.
Yes.
So I like
the last chapter in the book is on what I call negative interjects. People have things, beings, perpetrators in their head, and I do an eviction process. But sometimes it's a being of some sort, like that woman had the demon.
Yep.
Some people have different things, and they have no right to be here. This is the earth. I had it explained to me, and it's that when you have a near-death experiences are the things that normally cause it. You leave your body and you're up around the earth, and up there is the ones who've died but don't know and do their journey. You've got your green beings and all the other things from other universes. And when you come back, you go up unprotected. So when you come back, you're not protected. And they say, free ride, and they cling on. They're like Klingons.
Yeah.
And I had one of the women in the groups, once her grandmother was the Italian healer in the small village, and she said, I think I've got some of her skills. Can you come and talk with me? So I was telling about the Klingon thing, and her husband was getting dressed he was a third Dan martial art person, and he was a guard of all things at the big mental hospital. So he said, when we were talking about it, he said, I've got one of those. I said, have you? He said, yeah, it's green. I lives here on the shoulder. Doesn't need anything. Doesn't annoy me, so I don't mind him being there. And he said, when he only did one-on-one martial art. He didn't do it in a group, so you're hyper-aroused. He said, and quite a few times a person will stop and say, you've got a green thing on you. And he'll say, that's all right. He doesn't need anything. He's fine. Let him go. And what happened to him is he was drove his ute off a cliff, and he thought he was going to die when they smashed off down the cliff at the beach. So he left his body and then come back, and this thing clinged onto him. So people can have, one woman there writes about she had an experience, and she had a dead girl. We found out after talking to her, or seeing that she was gang raped and murdered, and she was in this woman and affecting her whole life. So, so when we had to send her to the light, whichever way she believed in, and that fixed that problem. Another one is a boy drowned, about 5 or 6 years old. Then they brought him back to life, and he had a nasty inside of him. They set out to destroy your life, literally destroy your life. He lost his family. When he rang up, every time he tried to get in front of his teenage sons, they'd say, F off, I don't want anything to do with you, get your act together, we might talk to you. He'd lost his job, living in, he had a home, but never cleaned it or did anything. He did the work because he had post-traumatic stress, and then we found out who was causing all the problem. And we asked to meet the little one who died, and he had a lizard in him, a lizard creature. He could see the tail. So that's what he believed he saw there, and that was affecting him. So we evicted that and healed him, and overnight he changed. He had no, they're called negative interjects. They're negative, they're interjecting in your life. And I'm finding people who have long-term diagnoses of illness have got some in there keeping it in. I had one.
What about Alzheimer's? Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's.
Could that be caused by something in there?
Usually it's the brain playing up. I would have, my mother went into it and we didn't realise it, and she went back to Adelaide to live, and my sister was a kinesiologist, and we'd worked together on lots of things, and if my sister was cooperative, we could have sat there and worked. My mother turned into a nasty 3-year-old, and my mother was the most beautiful mother you would ever have. And then I've got this 3-year-old yelling and screaming at me, and impossible to work with, to do anything, you know, terrible. And if my sister had been cooperative, we could have worked with her, because with the muscle testing, you can surrogate and ask the questions. And she was brilliant. My sister was brilliant with the muscle testing surrogate. And we could have helped. We could have healed the 3-year-old and did something. But also, if she'd had the right nutrition, that would have fed the brain, because there's things you can take to feed the brain. And but my sister just dumped her in a nursing home, and that was the end of her 5 years of being 3 years old. No, wouldn't put a hearing aid in, wouldn't put her teeth in, wouldn't talk to anybody, and she was just this 3-year-old vegetable. Heartbreaking. So dementia is the same thing. I think if you had the right food and the right nutrition, you could help with that. You can help with any disorder or any illness, actually, because I've had quite a few illnesses, and in Adelaide they had the Biocom machine. I don't know whether they have it here, but they it has a little points, and you can point on the parts of the brain, of the hand, for acupuncture points. And
The machine I work with is like the Biocom.
okay. So what I did, I have a healing room in my home in the head, so I put 6 massage tables there, and everyone who had, I'd ask whoever's got this illness or disorder to go onto the beds and be, always ask for 6 of any disorder, to be connected to the Biocom machine in their head. Now, the woman knew about my work, and I said, will you test the level of what we are now? And then I'll do the visualization, you give me the treatment, and then they test again. And she said doing that made the Biocom machine 6 times stronger. So you can use it for anything. The subconscious is there for you to use them and to get it to work for you. And if it's in the subconscious, it's fixable. I do higher level work with with people who want it, like past lives, ancestors, contracts that are affecting you today, things you can't do now because there was an ancestor who had it and come through. One girl with anorexia, she was born and refused to eat and never ate properly all her life. And when we looked up, there was 3 there who had died through starvation in her ancestor line. So it came through. So they're fascinating, finding out all those sorts of things about a person. always within their belief system. If they don't believe it, they're the chakras. I used to have a healing once a month in my place, which we're hoping we'll set up here. Everyone who's done my work or is a healer of some sort can once a month come and meet, and we do healings on each other. And you can ask, well, what do you want? And then whoever's got the skill will work with that person. And one of the women who came was very, very psychic and was up there all the time and having her couldn't ground herself. So we were grounding her through her abuse. And she said, well, I go to this 24 chakra and that chakra does such and such and such and such. And then she would talk about it. And I'm thinking, how the hell is the people like us who have no idea about these chakras, how are we going to be able to access them? I found the way. Works brilliantly. I'm a very practical, common sense person. And we found a way so we can go on anything that's happened and you can go up and down. It's like a type of a lift, which has special things we can ask of it. And you can ask anything. So we can work on that.
Not like now with the government, you're allowed to ask anything, can you?
Whatever the person wants and has the issue they want to do, I will do whatever I can to help them get well. And I'll train people up.
Well, I'm interested, definitely in the training for sure, and for helping.
Fantastic.
As well.
So we'll get a group going.
You got my number?
Yep.
And as I said, Beverley.
I'll come and give a talk with you and see.
Yeah.
And you might have a speciality. You want to work in a set area like with health or whatever. But people come in and you think, oh, it's a health issue, and it turns out to be a mental health issue. Their belief systems. Your belief system can make you sick.
A lot of that stuff that you said early on too in the discussion we had resonated with me, and I went through a similar journey, right? And as I said, I work as a naturopath and I love helping people. I do a lot of stuff with mental illness, and one of the things that you said to me is that I've always felt inherently that these people that suffer from disorders, these types of disorders, are sensitive individuals and very highly intelligent, and a lot
artistic.
of them, and a lot of them are also empaths as well. So so because they sense things very deeply.
And what's happened to them is too much for a person who's not. Another person would say, "Oh well, so what? I don't give a shit. That's not going to affect me." And then you get the others. 3 girls with anorexia, 16 years old, all wanted to be ballet dancers. And that's the perfectionist disorder. Ballet dancing is perfectionism. And they diet and do everything to do. So you have to work on that as well as their beliefs. And most of them have anxiety or trauma in there.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating. I love it.
Yes, it is fascinating. Awesome.
So
Thank you.
the lady who's the carer, we could, if you want to learn,
Yes.
you can come into the group with, just have a talk to me. I mean, if you're caring for people, you understand a lot of things. I don't expect you to have 5 degrees or anything, so
I
just,
don't have time. I've
No.
dabbled in here and this, but time is really
it's
difficult for me.
it's probably 2 weekends, that's it. And you space them about a week, 2 weeks apart. I can do a rushed one of a weekend, but you have to do a lot of follow-up with it. And a lot of times you can just work with a person. Like I had a person come desperate, couldn't keep a job, etc., etc., etc. So she came to the local community centre and I saw her there and I paid for the room and, I forget to ask people. So she had a mother issue, worked for 2-3 hours with her, never heard from her, saw her again. And then I get an email and a card saying, I worked with Beverley Cell and it was the most magnificent thing. I've now got to move to Sydney and I've got a full-time job and everything's fine. And I saw her for 3 hours. She had one issue, her mother. Fix the issue up. And so I thought, oh, well, she could have paid me. A lot of people think I get paid by somebody. like government organisations and that. I've just been approved the NDIS without without injections. And I've got the number because the woman I'm working with, no one else can work with. And I had somebody from Canberra come down, and I had 3 pages from the psychiatrist saying what all the trouble was. I saw her for 2 hours and fixed it. Thank you very much. And off she went. Because I knew what it was. She knew what it was because I met her 20 years ago, but she went off doing her own thing. And there's set ways of working with this disorder, and she ignored them. And then, so I put the structure in, worked with the ones that are causing the trouble, healed them, and that was it. Those ones I like. I could have dragged it on for a bit of money, couldn't I? But the NDS was really good. They said, let's have a look at what you're doing. She said, you're overqualified for a carer or a therapist. And I said, yep. And she looked at all the numbers and everything. She said, I can get you on that number, and that's got that price, hourly rate. I said, oh, cool, thank you very much. Most I've ever made. So,
but I'm a big believer that this is all meant to be because you're following this, right? And then you just get it done.
it's never been about the money.
Yeah.
I say to people, I'm like the mad professor sitting in the corner, you know, typing away and studying. Because I'm an independent researcher. There's no one backing me. I've got something that works and I'm going to get it out. And when people are trained up and they do their own thing, or they want to, I'll train them up, let them go, and I'll support them in any way possible. But when they've got the training and everything, I'll step back and I'll find out who will be a good trainer over the next couple of years. And the only thing is, when they train somebody, I'm to have a percentage of the training of my work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's all right. Keep me going. But and the 2 hard baskets and people that are scared to do anything, I get the phone calls. I say, give me a mind, I love it. The more difficult, the better. So, and of course, I've been doing this for over 20 years, so I've got loads and loads of experience. And it's a matter of just practicing it.
Well, it resonates with me, I've got to say. And thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fantastic.
Right, it was great meeting you all. And I do one-on-one and I do groups, so we can run a group here.
Have you got a card or something, or is it all on the book? Can I get it all on the book? Or?
It's, I've got a card somewhere.
Yes, please.
All right, sitting too long.